Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a really innovative idea called the next democracy.
Right.
Think of it as adding a new layer, sort of, to how we currently make decisions.
Yeah, allowing for much more frequent, more direct citizen involvement.
Exactly. Through things like ongoing voting, this option to delegate your vote to someone you trust.
And a completely new level of transparency, supposedly, in the process.
Our focus for this deep dive is sharp. Could Taiwan be the place where this idea really takes hold? Maybe even, piloting it on a broader scale.
It's fascinating to consider why Taiwan, specifically, might be receptive. To the core principles of the next democracy.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a really dynamic democratic environment there in East Asia, a strong tradition of citizen participation. The Sunflower Movement immediately comes to mind, doesn't it?
Yeah, a clear example of that civic engagement.
Plus, they've shown a real openness to using technology to improve how government functions.
Mm-hmm.
We see that with their regular use of referendums, for instance.
Absolutely. And it's not like they're starting from scratch. Taiwan already has some pretty impressive digital tools for democracy in action, right?
They do. Platforms like vTaiwan and the Join platform,
Yeah.
they've actually had a tangible impact on government decisions through citizen input.
So this concept, the next democracy, it almost feels like a logical step forward in their democratic evolution.
Precisely. It's less about replacing the current system, maybe more about enhancing it with these new tools for participation.
Okay, so let's really dig into this then. What aspects of Taiwan's specific political and cultural landscape might make the next democracy particularly appealing?
What could make them say, yeah, this is an idea worth exploring further?
Well, one of the first things that kind of jumps out is how the emphasis on, participatory input and transparency in the next democracy, it seems to align so well with Taiwan's existing democratic values.
That makes sense.
They have a culture where people expect to have their voices heard. And the success of platforms like vTaiwan, where, a significant percentage of discussed issues have led to government action, that really underscores this.
It shows a government that's, at least sometimes, willing to engage seriously with citizen input.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here is that the groundwork for this kind of evolution, it seems like it's already been laid in a way.
Uh-huh.
These existing digital democracy initiatives in Taiwan suggest that the core principles we see in the next democracy, empowering citizens, making government processes more open, they're already gaining traction, gaining acceptance within their society.
Right. It creates a context where this next step feels less revolutionary, maybe, and more like a natural progression.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we think about their current direct democracy mechanisms, like the referendums you mentioned, the next democracy could offer some interesting advantages there, too.
How so?
Well, while referendums are powerful, no doubt, they tend to be infrequent. And sometimes they can feel a bit like a blunt yes or no decision on really complex issues.
That's true. They can be quite polarizing.
Right. The continuous voting aspect of the next democracy, though, could provide a more ongoing, maybe more nuanced way for citizens to express their views on the specifics of policy, not just the big picture vote.
That raises a really important point about the nature of citizen engagement. Taiwan's referendums are significant events, definitely, but they don't necessarily provide the opportunity for that kind of constant feedback or, iterative adjustments that a system of continuous voting could facilitate.
Mm-hmm.
The next democracy offers the potential for a more dynamic, more responsive relationship between citizens and their government.
Exactly. It shifts the dynamic from citizens being just voters at certain intervals to potentially becoming more active collaborators in shaping policy.
Co-authors, almost.
Yeah. That could be particularly appealing, I imagine, to people who feel that traditional political channels don't always fully represent their concerns.
Like, imagine residents in a city, say Kaohsiung, feeling they have a more direct and continuous say on local environmental issues, things that directly impact their health, their well-being.
That makes sense.
And Taiwan also has a significant advantage when it comes to technology.
Definitely.
Now, it's important to acknowledge digital access isn't perfectly uniform across all demographics, of course.
Sure, the digital divide is real.
But their overall digital literacy is quite high. Plus, you have this incredibly innovative G0V community, these civic-minded tech experts already developing open-source tools for civic participation.
Right, the Gov0 movement.
That existing technological infrastructure could be a major catalyst for implementing the next democracy platforms. The idea of using their existing citizen digital certificates for secure authentication within such a system, That makes a lot of sense from a practical standpoint.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for me. The next democracy often talks about shorter policy cycles, sometimes even mentioning like 30-day windows for addressing issues.
Right, that agility aspect.
In Taiwan's rapidly evolving environment, that kind of speed and agility and policy adaptation could be a real asset, couldn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
They face a range of fast-moving challenges, both domestic and external. A system that can respond more quickly to changing circumstances could be a significant draw.
Absolutely. When you consider Taiwan's unique geopolitical situation, the constant need to adapt to external pressures, the promise of faster policy cycles enabled by more frequent citizen feedback could be particularly attractive. The ability to get more immediate, more ongoing input from the populace could lead to a more responsive and adaptable style of governance, especially in a world that's, well, constantly in flux.
So keeping all of this in mind, the culture, the tech, the need for speed, let's
Yeah.
think about how a pilot program for the next democracy might actually unfold there. The outline gives us two really intriguing possibilities. First, the scenario of a young, tech-savvy social activist in Taichung City, running on a platform centered around the next democracy. How might that play out?
This scenario really highlights the potential for this idea to gain traction from the ground up. Picture a candidate, maybe someone already involved with the GOV community or similar civic tech initiatives, advocating for a direct shift towards a system where citizen input isn't just advisory, but binding and continuous at the local level in Taichung.
So like a real-world app.
Yeah, their proposed app, maybe leveraging Taiwan's citizen digital certificates for secure voting, would let Taichung residents directly vote on, or delegate their votes on, a range of city council decisions. Even things like how the local budget gets allocated.
Wow, okay.
And the idea of including proxies, like respected community figures, maybe ward chiefs or academics, that's a smart way to address potential voter fatigue. And it acknowledges existing community leadership structures in Taiwan.
That makes sense. And the way this candidate might campaign, drawing parallels with past local referendum efforts, but arguing for something more agile, more nuanced through continuous input that seems like a very plausible approach given Taiwan's political discourse.
It does.
What kind of reactions might we anticipate if a campaign like this started to, gain momentum?
Oh, you'd likely see a diverse range of responses. Established political parties might initially view it with skepticism, perhaps questioning its practicality or its potential for disruption.
Sure, the incumbents might feel threatened.
But a campaign focused on empowering citizens and increasing transparency that could resonate strongly with younger voters and with those who feel disconnected from traditional political processes.
And the media.
Taiwan's vibrant free press, which has already shown interest in digital democracy stuff and figures like Audrey Tang, they'd likely give this significant coverage, which could, lend the idea legitimacy and broaden its appeal.
That's a compelling picture. Now let's consider the second pilot scenario. An incumbent representative, someone already in the legislative yuan deciding to experiment with the principles of the next democracy. How might that work within the existing political framework?
This scenario explores how someone already inside the system could adopt these ideas. The concept of a citizen delegate panel seems key here.
Okay.
This member of the legislative yuan could invite their constituents, perhaps even nationwide, depending on their role, to register and offer input on upcoming legislative bills.
Maybe integrating with existing platforms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Integrating this with Taiwan's existing join.gov.tw platform could provide a familiar and accessible interface. A crucial aspect, though, would be the commitment to making the legislative process more transparent.
How so?
Posting draft bills with clear explanations of the potential pros and cons, and then publicly detailing how the citizen feedback influenced their eventual vote, especially important in instances where their vote might diverge from the party's official stance.
That transparency piece seems absolutely vital for building trust in such a system, doesn't it?
Totally. Otherwise, people will just think it's for show.
And the example of issue-based engagement. Like a legislator on the education committee specifically seeking input from teachers and students on education reform bills. That makes it feel very grounded, very practical.
Right. And ensuring the interface is user-friendly, possibly multilingual, would also be critical for broad participation.
What might motivate a sitting legislator to actually do this? It sounds like extra work, potentially political risk.
Well, for an incumbent, piloting Next Democracy could actually be a very effective way to strengthen their connection with their voter base, to build a stronger sense of legitimacy.
Ah, okay.
They could then argue within their party, look, on this particular issue, the continuous feedback from my constituents overwhelmingly supports this direction. It could also be a way for a politician with, say, reformist leanings to distinguish themselves and potentially broaden their appeal beyond just traditional party lines.
Okay, so we have these potential avenues for pilot programs, a grassroots candidate, an experimenting incumbent. What kind of broader public reception, overall reactions might we expect to see in Taiwan if these ideas started to gain traction beyond just these initial experiments?
In Taiwan, I think the initial reaction would likely be one of significant interest, especially among those already actively engaged in civic affairs.
The politically active crowd.
Yeah, they're accustomed to public discussions about policy, and the prospect of having a more direct, ongoing voice in decision-making could be quite appealing.
And the media narrative.
Could very well frame this as a positive step in Taiwan's democratic evolution. Maybe, headlines emphasizing the move from traditional activism from sunflower to digital flowering or something like that.
Catchy.
And given the past success of platforms like vTaiwan, endorsements from influential figures in tech and civic innovation spaces, also quite probable, I'd say.
But there would inevitably be some skepticism as well, right? Concerns about, well, the spread of misinformation or the potential for what some might call mob rule. Those often come up.
Absolutely. And drawing on Taiwan's past experiences with referendums, where the impact of misinformation has been a point of discussion, those kinds of concerns are valid. They should be anticipated.
So how do you counter that?
Well, this is why the design of any pilot program would need to incorporate robust mechanisms for deliberation, for information sharing, perhaps drawing lessons from how vTaiwan uses tools like POLIS to help identify areas of consensus, shared understanding.
Right. Finding common ground.
The goal would be to ensure participation is informed, not just driven by fleeting trends or, the rapid spread of unverified information.
What about the government's reaction on a larger scale? Would there be a general sense of support, or might some within the government see this as, a potential challenge to their existing authority and processes?
The government's response could be multifaceted, I think. On one hand, initiatives that enhance citizen participation align really well with Taiwan's image as an open democratic society.
Right. It fits their international brand.
So there might be a degree of quiet support, especially if these efforts originate from civil society or individual legislators. However, tensions could arise if the outcomes of these citizen-driven platforms begin to diverge significantly from established government policy directions.
Give me an example.
Okay, imagine if a continuous voting mechanism indicated strong public opposition to a major infrastructure project that the government is fully committed to. That would really test the extent to which the government is willing to, cede decision-making power or significantly alter its plans based on this direct citizen input.
That's a critical point, and we can't overlook the role of various interest groups within Taiwan. They're known to be quite active, quite influential in shaping public policy. How might they engage with a next democracy system if it were to become more widespread?
Interest groups would undoubtedly see a next democracy platform as another significant avenue to exert their influence. No question.
Like with referendums.
Exactly. They have historically mobilized considerable resources around referendum campaigns, and a system of continuous voting and liquid delegation would likely see similar levels of engagement.
So, mobilization efforts.
We might see well-organized groups actively encouraging their members and supporters to join the platform and strategically delegate their votes to individuals or even organizations that align with their interests. Think about past referendums on energy or same-sex marriage groups mobilized heavily.
Right.
Now, the transparency of vote counts could potentially reduce some forms of, let's say, behind-the-scenes lobbying. But we might also see a rise in more open public advocacy and mobilization efforts directly on the platform itself. It could become another battleground, potentially framed by the media as part of partisan wars.
Though hopefully Taiwan's media literacy and fact-checking community could help foster civil discourse.
One would hope so. That's certainly a strength they possess.
It sounds like it could create a really dynamic, potentially transformative environment. So if these pilot programs in Taiwan were to show real promise and begin to scale up, what kind of short-term and medium-term effects might we anticipate seeing across Taiwanese society and governance?
In the short term, I think we'd likely see a significant boost in civic engagement, particularly if early pilot programs demonstrate tangible results.
Like the Taichung example.
Yeah, if a candidate there successfully implements a next democracy approach, you could expect high initial participation, community organizations, digitally savvy citizens spreading the word.
And younger people?
We might also see a notable increase in youth interest in local governance, drawn by this more direct, tech-enabled form of participation.
And for the national pilot, the legislator.
We could see broader public input on previously contentious bills, providing a unique, real-time snapshot of public sentiment that goes way beyond traditional polling methods.
Which could put pressure on others.
Exactly. This initial success could create pressure on other elected officials to adopt similar methods of engaging with their constituents.
That paints a picture of a more energized, more participatory democracy. What about the medium-term implications if these trends continued?
In the medium term, if these pilots continue to be successful and gain wider adoption, we might start to see actual policy decisions that more closely reflect the aggregated sentiment of the citizenry on an ongoing basis.
A tighter feedback loop.
Right. A more direct and continuous feedback loop for policymakers than just relying on infrequent elections or traditional opinion surveys. It's also plausible this could lead to an improvement in civic trust if people feel the system is genuinely responsive to a broader range of voices.
That if seems important.
It's crucial. You have to manage expectations. If citizen input is consistently disregarded or overridden by the formal political structures, well, it could lead to disillusionment, undermine the very trust the system aims to build.
So potential downsides too.
For sure. But on the upside, we might also see the model replicated in other cities or at different levels of government. Perhaps even specialized platforms for specific areas, like participatory budgeting, which some legislators already experiment with.
And learning from the pilots.
The data gathered from these early pilots would be invaluable for refining the design, addressing unforeseen challenges, optimizing user interfaces, encouraging broader participation across different demographics, figuring out the best mechanisms for proxy delegation, identifying topics needing more public education, all that stuff.
So let's look big picture. If these initial experiments in Taiwan prove successful, what are the broader prospects for wider adoption? Not just within Taiwan itself, but also potentially influencing other democracies, maybe regionally or even globally.
Well, given Taiwan's well-established reputation as a hub for democratic innovation, successful pilots for the next democracy would significantly increase the likelihood of broader adoption within Taiwan.
We could see the government getting behind it.
Potentially. The government might even consider officially supporting its integration with existing digital governance platforms like Join. Looking further out, you could even imagine more formalized structures, perhaps a digital chamber or a similar process where citizen-initiated proposals could gain real traction within the formal legislative system.
And beyond Taiwan.
Regionally, Taiwan's experience could serve as a powerful example, potentially inspiring other democracies in Asia, South Korea, Japan maybe, who are also exploring ways to deepen citizen engagement in the digital age.
What about less democratic places?
Well, even in countries with less liberal political systems, there might be interest in the technological infrastructure underpinning the next democracy, though likely with a very different focus, probably more on top-down control rather than bottom-up empowerment.
And globally.
Globally, successful Taiwanese pilots could become a really compelling case study, demonstrating the viability of continuous citizen engagement even in complex, often deeply divided societies.
So Taiwan could share lessons learned.
Absolutely. Taiwan could then share valuable insights on design, implementation, potential challenges, moderation, security, inclusivity, at international democracy conferences, contributing to a global conversation about the future of democratic governance.
It could even be part of their international image.
Yeah, a mature, well-functioning next democracy system could even become an element of Taiwan's international soft diplomacy efforts, showcasing its commitment to democratic innovation.
So to bring it all together, then, it really does seem like Taiwan, with its, established democratic culture, high levels of tech adoption, existing platforms for citizen participation, it could indeed be fertile ground for the ideas behind the next democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. The potential benefits for Taiwan are significant. The possibility of deeper citizen engagement, more responsive, more agile governance, the ability to address complex challenges with greater input from those most affected.
The challenges remain.
Of course. While there will undoubtedly be challenges to navigate, particularly around digital equity, ensuring the integrity of the system. The existing foundation of digital literacy and civic engagement in Taiwan provides a strong starting point. a really strong base for piloting and potentially scaling these innovative approaches to democracy.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive into the potential for the next democracy in Taiwan. It really makes you think. Considering Taiwan's pioneering spirit in the realm of digital democracy, could its embrace of the next democracy serve as a compelling model for other democracies around the world? Those seeking to deepen citizen involvement in an increasingly complex world. What unique lessons might be learned from Taiwan's experience, regardless of where you happen to live? It certainly gives us a lot to consider. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.